It's time for the Volquest podcast, where we dissect the biggest news items of the week.
Good Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Volquest.com podcast presented by Smoky Mountain Organics with Rob Lewis and Austin Price and Brent Hubbs. Glad to have you along with us. Be sure and check out our friends at Smoky Mountain Organics online at SmokyMountainOrganics.com, or you can check them out in one of their 4 locations in East Tennessee, including that Knoxville location on Kingston Pike, down across from Trader Joe's and the bookstore down there. East Tennessee's most trusted health and wellness store. That is Smoky Mountain Organics. Plenty to get to in this podcast, as we'll start obviously with hoops. The Tennessee basketball team on a roll, blowing out South Carolina at South Carolina on Saturday, 81-57. Rob, the basketball went in the hoop, and all of a sudden this team looks like a lot better basketball team when the ball's going in from the perimeter. A big time game from obviously Ziegler and Josiah James. Just an easy afternoon for Tennessee, particularly in that second half. They took care of business.
Yeah, and I leave last week not knowing if it's a fluke, if they found something out, what's the deal? Because it's a team that was averaging, under 70 points a game, 68 in SEC play, and they score 171 in 2 games against Texas A&M, South Carolina aren't great, but they're pretty 2 solid defensive teams, and Tennessee just exploded on them. And you mentioned Ziegler with 18 points. He got all those in the second half. He was named SEC Freshman of the Week. That was obviously his most prolific game. Josiah sets a career high with 20 points at South Carolina, but he had 14 against A&M, so he averages 17 on the week. I don't think that's a coincidence. Those are Tennessee's 2 highest SEC scoring games when Josiah plays his 2 best offensive games. And I thought he didn't put up the point total, so he got overshadowed a little bit. I thought that might have been Kennedy's best game on Saturday. He had 11 points, 10 assists, and only 1 turnover in 33 minutes.
Yeah,
Rob, Rob, you mentioned when we taped TV Sunday, still you felt like it's still a too small a sample size. Don't you think if they can go for 70, I don't even think they have to get to 80. If they can go for 70 plus at the hump and then back home against Vanderbilt this week in back-to-back games, to couple that with the last 2 games in 10 minutes, they may be having. At that point, don't you have to kind of chalk it up as they did find something?
Yeah, I agree, but I need to see a little bit more. But I'm suspecting that they have found something. I don't think they're going to score 80 plus a game, but the way they play defense, if they can score 74, 75 points a game, it really changes the outlook for this team going into March.
Rob, to me, it's interesting, and I know that Rick Barnes has talked about this, but the creation of offense, because they seem to be dribbling with more of a purpose than just dribbling around the 3-point line. They're attacking, towards the basket to create gaps and to create some opportunities. I know they've shot the ball better, but I think their looks have been better as well. Is that accurate or is that not accurate?
No, I think it's totally accurate. And I think Josiah talked about that a great deal. I think they're moving, not just dribbling, but off the ball. I think guys are cutting harder. I think they're moving quicker. I think when they're just like swinging the ball around, I think that's happening faster. It's going from the left wing to the top of the key to the right wing pretty quickly, which makes the defense move. And it may not seem like much, but fraction of a second here, a fraction of a second there, and you're against the 6'6" guy that's closing out on you, that can make a big difference in how clean your look is, how much time you feel like you have to set your feet or get into your release. So I think they're doing a lot of little things better on offense, and it's showing up in a big way.
To that point, I asked you this first because we taped the locker room before we did the Nation about Josiah James. He says it feels like he has more arch on his shot, better rotation on his shot. Then I asked Rick Barnes. I said, "Coach, tell me if I'm crazy." And he said that he thinks more than anything, it is the ability, as Brent pointed out, for them to drive and to just add which helps the spacing just a little bit more. And then for Josiah in particular, it is literally not shooting off balance. He goes, we went back and looked at all of the shots early in the year. He goes, because he made 5 threes in that scrimmage against Davidson. Then he got hurt, and then he, just got into a slump early on, and then went back and reviewed each shot. And he was always either leaning to the right, leaning to the left, leaning forward, wasn't set. And all of a sudden, because of the extra spacing, he has that extra second to set himself, which is creating better rotation, better arch on the shot, and a much more productive player from beyond the arc, which again, no one expects him to shoot 50% from three, but at the same time, when he can knock down a few, it just helps everybody else, including Vescovy, who they just continue to key in on every time they play somebody else.
For me, Rob, and Josiah's shot from the 3-point line certainly looks better. And I think getting the ball in a better position helps that as well. I was more impressed with the fact that he put the ball on the floor at least twice on Saturday and went to the elbow for a jump shot. That's an area of his game we've talked about for several years. Just didn't know if it would ever be there. I don't think the light switch has suddenly come on, and that's going to be a mainstay in his game. But if he will play some offensive basketball that way, boy, he's a different guy to defend than what he's been the first part of this year. I mean, I don't know what's got that going, but I thought those two shots that he made at the elbow off the dribble were as key as anything for Tennessee offensively.
Yeah, and I love Josiah. Personality wise, he may be my favorite kid on the team, but I have always been mystified about his inability to not put it on the floor and get it. I mean, with his frame, I mean, he's 6'6", 215, 220. I mean, he is a strong, athletic kid. He's really bouncy. Can take contact and still finish. And that has never been part of his game. And even what you're talking about, he's getting into he's getting into the paint, but he's still not going to the rim. I think that's the next step I'd like to see. But even if he's shooting 40% from three, like he is in the last 8 games, there's going to be opportunities for him to take advantage and, dribble past some closeouts and do that. And not only does he get a wide open 12, 14 footer, it opens up offensive rebound possibilities for his teammates when guys have to come up and try to contest that shot.
Well, and if he's going to play the stretch for some, and they're going to play in that small lineup, and he's playing out there, there's a matchup win for him. Because if that defender has to come out and close out hard, you really think he's got a chance to take the guy off the dribble. I mean, because of the athletic quickness there. I just, Robert Hubbs did some of that with Barnes, where he would take that thing to the free throw line and have that pull up jumper. I just think Josiah James's game. I just think that it's tailor made for basketball like that. We'll see if that will grow with him, but that is a potentially huge development for this offense. If you have to worry about him doing something like that, whether it's on the baseline to 12 feet or whether it's driving to the free throw line, if you have to worry about a mid-range jumper from him, it changes a lot of things. Coach Barnes said on the Nation Sunday night, Rob, that he thinks Olivier is going to be all right and going to be fine. How big of a deal is that for Tennessee if he can't go Wednesday night against Mississippi State? How important is it for them to get him back in the lineup ASAP?
I mean, I think it's really important, Huber. I wrote in the 3-2-1 today that I think that I think he's the biggest X factor. So I think this deep in the season, you're going to get scoring for the perimeter. It might not be all 4 guys, Sonny, Josiah, Zakai, and Kennedy, but 2 or 3 of those guys are going to show up and score for you. And when all 4 of them show up, you're going to see what you saw on Saturday. They're going to blow people out. But you've got to get something in the paint. I mean, Olivier is the leading scorer in SEC play down there at 8.5 points a game. I mean, more often than not, you're not even getting a double-digit post score. And you can survive like that some nights, but you've got to be able to at least get a little offense in there. I thought against Texas A&M, he looked as good as he had all year. He had 15 points, 7 rebounds, and more than that, it was the way he looked. He made quick decisions when he got the basketball. He either knew he was going up or he got it back out. He kept the ball moving. And we're taping this on Monday afternoon. I'm getting ready to go over and watch practice in just a little bit, so we'll have a more of a definitive answer. But the short answer to your question is I think he's really big. I mean, I think if he goes out, you put a ton of pressure on Brandon Huntley Hatfield to produce. And I mean, the kid's got all the talent and potential in the world, but he hadn't looked like a guy that's ready for the conference grind.
No, he's not. I mean, he's gotten some opportunities. He's not taking advantage of much of them. He might get more opportunities than he's ever had. Again, this week, particularly against Mississippi State, and we'll see. I mean, there's Vanderbilt's post play has gotten better since Tennessee played them a month ago, and Mississippi State's going to be tough and physical on the block. I mean, that's just the way they're going to play. They're going to try to play, in the paint and really force some issues for Tennessee there in a tough matchup, I think, on a late game. I mean, that one sets up a lot for Mississippi State, it looks like. But if Tennessee can limit turnovers, and I think the other stat from the South Carolina game that jumps out to me, Rob, is Tennessee had 17 points off of turnovers. They turned South Carolina mistakes into easy buckets for themselves.
And they go ahead, AP.
I was going to say, if Tennessee can win this game, that would be 3 straight on the road in league play, and would also mean, they're not losing to Vanderbilt at home. I know Negative Hubs wants to go ahead and start talking about the improved post play for Vanderbilt, but they're not losing to Vanderbilt at home on Saturday. So if they can win this Mississippi State game, Hubs, they're going to be on a 7-game conference winning streak when Kentucky rolls into town for that late night till a week from now.
Yeah, I think the Mississippi State's a tough matchup. Like you said, they're good inside. They lead the SEC in field goal percentage, and that's because they get a lot of high quality looks in the paint. They're last or they're next to last in 3-point shooting, but they get that ball close to the rim and they're good at scoring it. Really good rebounding team. They're second in the league in rebounding. That's something that Tennessee's challenged in every night out. So I think the matchup at Starkville is a tough one. I'll be surprised if Mississippi State's not favored.
Yeah, I think for Tennessee defensively has been better. I didn't think they were great against Texas A&M. They were better against South Carolina, who's not a great team. But again, 17 points off turnovers, finding some easy buckets for this team has been a challenge, and they obviously found those on Saturday.
But they were plus 16 in 2 games last week in turnover margin. Tennessee, and that Tennessee didn't force a ton. They forced 29 in 2 games, which is good but not fantastic. But the more impressive thing was they only had 13 turnovers themselves in 2 games. That's a lot of nights you take that in 1 game.
Yep, and we'll see if Kennedy Chandler and Ziegler can continue to do that. We've talked about Ziegler, but Rob, as you watch him, why has this been the perfect marriage? It seems in year 1. What is it? Just because that's his personality, that's who he is, makes it the right fit? I mean, why is the 5'9" freshman from New York been kind of the spark plug for this team?
I think one of the reasons is him and his head coach have a very similar mentality. They are both fiery competitors. He's not bothered by Rick. Rick can coach him as hard as he wants to, and it's it just rolls off his back. I think that's a big part of it, and I think the main thing is just his personality, man. I mean, I think he's always been like this. I think he's always played with a chip on his shoulder because of his size, and it's nothing new to him to have to come in and prove to people that he can play. And I think he relishes it. I mean, the kid is fearless. I mean, he already is a fan favorite. I mean, can you imagine what it's going to be like 4 years from now?
No, I mean, he's fun to watch play, and like you said, he is. I mean, he's fearless in every way, and he makes them go. And Rick Barnes told me the preseason. He said people are going to love him, but I didn't think it would happen this fast. It would have this kind of impact. I thought he would have kind of more freshman moments. He may have one, Wednesday night, but he hasn't had one the last few weeks. And I think Chandler, can he build off that? I think Chandler's been good the last 2 games. After not playing down the stretch of that Texas game, you wonder if that got his attention more than anything else, because he's taking care of the basketball and has been better in these last 2 games for sure. But we'll see how this team does this week.
I think that was a wake-up call, however, because I bet it's been a long time since Kennedy Chandler set the last 5 minutes of a close game in his basketball career.
You think he ever has? I'm not trying to be.
No, I'm with you. He maybe he hasn't. That's maybe when he was in 6th grade and playing on the junior high team or something. But no, I bet that was an eye opener.
Well, it should have been, and maybe it's turned it into a positive, because again he's played well. These last 2 games, and seems to have gotten a little bit more under control. It looks like he's dribbling with a little bit more of a purpose and not over dribbling as much as he was 3 weeks ago. But again, you said it best. It's a couple of games. It's not a full sample size, but it certainly seems like this team is moving in the right direction. If they can stay healthy, they get their offense moving in the right direction, and their defense has been there for the most part all year long. but rebounding will be a challenge with some of the teams left on the schedule for sure. When you look at the rest of the league, Rob, right quick before we jump into some football stuff, what do you make out of after Kentucky, after Auburn and Kentucky? What do you make of this league?
I think we might get proved wrong Wednesday night. No matter what happens Wednesday night in Starkville, I think it's Kentucky, Auburn pretty clearly. Then I think Arkansas and Tennessee have sort of separated themselves from a really jumbled pack. And I think Mississippi State's a good team, but I don't, even if they win a tough one over Tennessee on Wednesday night, I still think they're fifth. But I mean, the shocker is LSU and Alabama.
Yeah.
I mean, 6 weeks ago, they would have been in the conversation for the best team in the league, certainly, without question, one of the best 4 teams in the league. And now, I mean, they're 4-6, both of them in the middle of the pack. I mean, Alabama's got good enough wins, over Gonzaga, over Baylor, that they're going to make the tournament unless the wheels just absolutely fall off. LSU, man, I don't know. They've lost 6 or 7. Only win in that time was over Texas A&M, and they were behind by 6 with like 2 minutes left in that game. We'd be talking about a 7-game losing streak. I mean, it feels like he's lost that team. I won't be surprised at all if they don't make the tournament.
I mean,
And
you kind of become who you are at this point, right, Rob? I mean, look at the Lady Vols. They should have lost. They've lost 3 out of 4. They should have lost 4 in a row. But that's basically the same thing you're talking about there. Is like, you just kind of get in one of those funks, and you can't reverse. You can't get it reversed.
Yeah, I think Alabama's a little different because, I mean, to be fair, they played Auburn and Kentucky last week.
Lost both
of those games. That's a different animal than losing to Vanderbilt,
Arkansas,
and Arkansas. But Alabama's also lost to Missouri and Georgia on the year. So I mean, they have some problems, but I think they have a much better shot at turning it around. And then I think you got some teams like Mississippi State, Florida. I know Lenardi, I think, had both of those their last 4 out. Then they could play their way in. But right now it looks like a 6-bid league to me, with the 1 and the 2 seed in Auburn, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Arkansas, anywhere from 4 to 6, depending on how they close. And then somebody, a couple other teams will sneak in.
Yeah, I mean, and at one point you thought this might be a 7 or 8 bid, but I just don't see that with where some of these teams are going.
No, LSU would have to turn it around, and Florida and Mississippi State would both have to make it for them to get 8.
Yeah, I don't see that being the case out there at this point in time. But it's the SEC. It'll be crazy down the last month of this season for sure, the regular season. And for Tennessee, that is a Wednesday night, late night, Rick's favorite time, the 9:00 tips on a midweek that everybody just dearly loves. Tennessee in Starkville, Mississippi on Wednesday night, and then Saturday evening, 6:00 is the home tip against Vanderbilt coming up on Saturday. So we'll keep a track of all of that. And Tennessee going to have maybe some recruiting visitors, Rob, coming up in the next couple of weeks as well. I know we mentioned some of that in War Room. We'll have more on those guys coming up as well. But Tennessee getting a little activity on the recruiting front, maybe some unofficial visitors with some home games on a Saturday as well. Some official.
Yeah, they'll have an official visitor each of the next 2 weekends. The Texas Guards, and forgive me right now, it's not in front of me. They're both coming in over the next couple of weekends, one apiece, and then they'll have some unofficial guys in as well. I know Jared Hall from Lebanon is coming back in. That'll be a couple trips for him just in the last month, trending in the right direction there. So, and there'll be some other names. Check the War Room. We'll have some updates.
Yep, we'll have plenty of updates on that, but there is a little bit of basketball recruiting getting cranked up. Speaking of recruiting, it's not getting cranked up on the football side of things, Austin Price, because it's the dead period, which is normal for everybody right now. Still phone calls to be made. Everything kind of pointing towards getting to that first Saturday in March for that junior day focal point by this coaching staff, who's back in the office this week after a couple of days off at the end of last week. It's about securing these guys for junior days and then working on this current team heading into their true winter workout programs and getting ready for spring practice. Recruiting wise, you still feel like that first weekend's got a chance to be a solid weekend for Tennessee, right?
Yeah, I mean, I expect Tennessee to have a lot of guys in that weekend. Some of those in-state guys that they didn't have in back in January, like Caleb Herring, Justin Brown, out-of-state guys, Christian Conyers. I think Rico Walker may be in that weekend. Tennessee's will certainly try to get all the guys that were in here that last junior day. Why not? If you can get especially some of those big timers to come back, why not? I mean, I'm sure they won't because they want to go to other schools, but why not at least ask? You just never know. So yeah, I mean, the month of February is more kind of game planning, working towards spring practice and recruiting calls. You know, they used to have those a couple of dates at the end of the month where teams would have junior days, but you just don't see that anymore. It is dead. And, so coaches have been out of the office late last week through the weekend. They're back in the office now and, kind of getting to work on, what their plans are for spring practice, what they want to see out of the current team. And then, as you said, making recruiting calls.
And keeping an eye on the transfer portal as well, because that's going to be big for Tennessee when you look at this. I mean, if Tennessee's taken 5, if they can get 5 transfers at the end of spring, I mean, that's got to be what, 3 defense, 2 offense, Austin? I mean, if that's
at least I can see 4 and 1. I can see Tennessee's the only one being the offensive line. Like, a lot of it depends on too, like where do they feel like they are at running back and who's available. They're not taking Madre London, so to speak, like a guy that can't help them. Like that, they're going to take somebody that can help them, or they won't take anybody. And so, like if the right guy's not out there, I don't think they're just going to take a running back to take a running back. At least that's my opinion. I mean, again, a lot of it can change, and what you and I think they need versus what they think they need can be 2 different things. I'm interested to see too, like Brent, like just kind of like, who else potentially departs, which would free up more space. And then 2, like, what happens with these Auburn kids if they make a move? Like, does the league, does the league sign off on a waiver at this point for kids? Because, it's past February 1st. So, like, if some of these kids may go, this is crap. We signed on back in January. We've been here a month. You fired our coach. Like, this isn't fair that we can't go somewhere we want to go. Our other option was to go to LSU, or our other option was to go to Tennessee or wherever. So, like, I just, does the league sign off on some type of waiver there if Auburn pulls the trigger like many believe they will? Here's the other one. Let's say Auburn hires Lane. You don't think there's a trickle-down effect from there? They brought all those transfers into Oxford. Like, it's going to be interesting. And I can promise you, Ole Miss, if that happens, Ole Miss will pivot to Jeff Lebby, and Oklahoma will be looking for an offensive coordinator.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think the 2 things that are interesting, I got a couple other questions, but the 2 things that are interesting, what you're saying is, it's one thing to let a guy have a national letter of intent if he's not enrolled in school, but are you going to let those midtermers be one-time transfers, or let them out since they've gone to class? And many of those guys were midterm enrollees, particularly those DBs that Tennessee was highly interested in. So would you let that happen? One other quick note on transfers. Keep this in mind. We've talked a lot about that February 1st date, and that's an important date. However, if you are a grad transfer, that February date's null and void. You can be a grad transfer in May and go right into an SEC school and be eligible immediately. So that February 1 date going SEC to SEC,
more meant for the young kids.
Yeah, only accounts for non-grad transfers, younger kids who are making that move. So I asked this question for both of you. You're the general manager of Tennessee football. Congratulations. It comes with no extra money for you, but you're the GM for the day. Where is your pecking order of priorities on the transfer docket by position? Who wants to go first? What are you looking at as your pecking order for what you have to have? Say you got 5 spots. Where are you going first? What's the most important thing when you look at this roster? I don't have any idea where Tennessee's at. I'm talking about your all's opinion. What do you think you got to have first?
Secondary. I think you got to go secondary. It depends on who you can get. Might even take 2 in the secondary. But I think you go secondary. I think you go linebacker, although I think you feel a little bit better about where they are there than maybe, a month ago when, Juju was out the door and Jeremy Banks was flirting with going out the door, and now both seem to be back. I go offensive tackle. Then I would go D-line, and then 5th I'd go running back. And again, it's never as simple as black and white. It's never as simple as black and white. Sometimes there is a gray there. So like, that for me, that'll depend on kind of who's available and who's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, and again, you take best available because you got needs at a lot of spots. But I'm just curious as to your position pecking order. Rob, where are you at?
Yeah, I'm pretty much with AP in secondary. I mean, I don't know that you're going to be able to find one of these guys, but if you could find an edge guy, a quick twitch guy, I mean, I think that would be a no-brainer. I would always take another big body, big interior defensive tackle body. Always, I mean, just about any circumstances. Help, some kind of offensive tackle depth. A swing guy, ideally. I mean, those guys are rare. At least guys that can do it at a high level are rare. But if you could get, kind of a utility player in the offensive line, that would be big. And I would still, if I could get the right guy, I would take another wide out.
I think the wide receiver position for me is going to be interesting because I'm with you. I think they have to have another outside guy. But do they feel like post spring practice, could a guy like Caleb Webb, show them enough that they think, hey, we can get him ready because he went through spring ball, whereas a transfer has not gone through spring ball and, that type of way? Or is there a guy out there who's established enough as a playmaker that you feel? I think you have to answer that question. I think that defensive end question is a bigger question mark than maybe I thought. I just don't know where they are in terms of depth at the defensive end position. And then I think you got to have corners. So running back to me is at the bottom of the list. I'm with Austin and you guys. I think that would be at the bottom of my list if I were a general manager and where it was at. So I would go secondary, defensive end, offensive tackle, wide receiver. That's where I would go in terms of the priorities if I were the general manager looking at this roster. But it is important to note that what not just about who's available, Austin, but it's also about, does your needs change based on what you saw in spring practice?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that can happen. I mean, you may feel good coming out of spring or feel like, okay, we can survive. I think the one spot they will definitely go is secondary. I mean, and I think the other spot they'll definitely go is offensive tackle, unless Mincy or somebody rises to the occasion.
Yeah, I mean, even with Mincy, though, when you look at the numbers, Austin, there's just not enough bodies there. I mean, they're just short at that position. I mean, I think that's a priority.
You were short at that position a year ago, and basically you just replaced Cade with Gerald Mincy, who is not as experienced, not as good, and
yeah, and you lacked depth big time there a year ago. So. Yeah. I mean, I don't, it's unfair to ask, I think, Addison Nichols to be ready to be a real factor at right tackle, but we'll see what he looks like in spring practice. I mean, he's going to be given every opportunity, but that's a hard ask for a high school freshman to be ready to go there. So
and he being the 2 deep.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see, what he looks like and what, what some guys look like in spring, particularly these newcomers, will dictate a lot about what that transfer portal looks like. But that's going to be important for Tennessee. They're on the hunt. They're evaluating everybody that's continuing to go in the portal, and then obviously getting ready for that junior day in recruiting and spending this month getting the newcomers ready and getting this team further developed and ready for spring practice. Quick shout out, Austin. I thought Cade Mays, as you mentioned, had a good week at the Senior Bowl. I think he's helped himself. It is a deep draft, but I think he did what he needed to do down there. I think Bayless Jones had a good week down there. I think the questions with Alante remain a little bit about how well does he run? Is he a corner or is he a safety in the NFL? He didn't hurt himself necessarily, but I think that question still remains. So that 40 time is going to be big for Alante. But all three of those guys seem to perform well. But I think Cade helped himself as much as anybody, as you predicted he would, because the opportunities were going to be there for him and his versatility was going to shine.
Well, for a guy that really was left out of the Senior Bowl when they initially made the rosters and was an addition due to someone else's subtraction, it was an opening and he took advantage. And kudos to him, man. I mean, I know he was very excited to get in. And at that point, it was all pedals down. He's out training in Arizona when he's not, going to the Waste Management Open this coming week and, crushing beers on the 16th. But he's out there training in Arizona. He'll be back for pro day coming up in March, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens with that. We'll see what happens with the rest of those guys as they continue to develop. Senior Bowl's become an interesting event. A lot of those guys bailed out. A lot of guys bailed out and did not play in the game. Just went through the practice during the week, and their agent said, "Hey, there's no point in you playing in the game. You've shown what you've needed to show yourselves to scouts out there, and don't take a chance on getting hurt in a game that really doesn't matter." So that's a growing trend with that game that nobody seems to really care about, but it certainly affects what that game looks like on Saturdays. But it's about what you do during the week, not about what you do on that particular game day itself.
Everything's a growing trend, whether it's eliminating high school all-star games or not playing in the Senior Bowl. I mean, it's it's wildly becoming more and more of a thing at all levels of all of these kind of extracurricular type stuff.
Yep, because the question is, how much can you help yourself in that one particular afternoon versus the chance of getting hurt? And that's what's in a lot of people's head, and that's what's mentioned to a lot of guys through the process. So again, those guys will continue to work out, get ready for their pro days, private workouts as well. And in Tennessee, on the current team, getting ready for spring practice. We'll have full coverage of Tennessee basketball, continued coverage of recruiting, coverage of this Tennessee football team as well. Much more. That's all at Volquest.com. That's going to do it for this Tuesday edition of the Volquest.com podcast, presented by our good friends at Smoky Mountain Organics. For Rob Lewis and Austin Price, I'm Brent Hubbs. Thanks for joining us. Have a great rest of your Tuesday, everybody.
You've been listening to the Volquest podcast every week here on Volquest.